The floor of the West warehouse is hot enough to cook through my coat, and the girl my parents brought home when I was 11 years old is crouching over me with a smile you could print on a birthday card. My name is Owen Hollis. I am 24. I have maybe 90 seconds of air left. Both of us know it, and only one of us is unhappy about the arithmetic. Sienna holds her sleeve over her mouth so the smoke does not spoil her voice. She wants me to hear every word. She has waited years to say them to a face that cannot answer back. Owen, she says, you should have signed the paper. Everything would have been quick and clean. Now it has to be slow, and honestly, that is your own fault. Get one sentence out of my chest, and it costs me a lot, and I spend it on asking her whether she practiced this in the car on the way here. She says, twice. Then she smiles like we are two people at a wedding, and she has just told me something charming about the bride. I try to move my leg. The shelf came down across my ankle when the second rack went, and it feels like somebody has bolted me to the concrete with a spike. She watches me try. She does not help. She tilts her head the way she does at dinner when our mother asks whether she is eating enough. You want the list? She says. Fine. Since we are here, I will give you the whole list. I took the patent. I put my name on your invention when you were 21 and too tired to read 4 pages. I took Adrian, and that one was easy because he wanted a surname more than he wanted a friend. I took your parents in the first year, she says, before you even understood that there was a competition running in your own house. You kept building things. I kept building them. And tonight, I took the alarms. 19 sensors in this building. Your sensors, Owen. I muted every one of them from the admin account at 9:40, and nobody will ever look because nobody ever looks. That is what finally breaks something in my chest. Not the fire, not my ankle. The 19 white boxes on that ceiling, which I designed at 19 years old to stop people dying exactly like this. She sees my face change and she likes it. She leans down closer. Her hair is perfect. There is not one mark on her anywhere, and she smells like the shop on Marlowe Street where our mother buys her scarves. The insurance is $60 million, she says. The transfer clears next Thursday, and you get to be a very sad story that mom tells at parties for the rest of her life. Somewhere behind the wall, I can hear Tom Buckley hitting the loading door with something metal. He is 61 years old. He has worked nights in this yard for 12 years, and he calls me kid. Sienna hears it too. She stands and brushes the ash off her knees like a woman leaving a picnic. The chain is on that door, she says. He will keep trying though. He is very loyal. It is honestly sweet. Then she looks at her own hand and makes a small unhappy sound because there is a thin red scratch across the back of it where she caught herself on the rack. The phone is already ringing. She answers it standing over my body in the smoke, and my mother's voice comes out of the speaker loud enough for me to hear every word of it. Sweetheart, are you out? Are you safe? Is your hand hurt? Sienna makes her voice go small and wet. It hurts a little, Mom. There is a cut. I am so scared. My mother is crying now. My father is shouting at somebody to get a doctor to the gate. Nobody on that phone says my name. Not once. Not one single time in 90 seconds. I am lying in my own building with my leg under a steel rack, and the last thing I ever hear from the people who raised me is my mother asking whether the scratch is deep. Sienna hangs up. She steps over my body the way you step over a puddle, careful with her shoe, and she does not look down at me even once on her way to the door. The roof gives. The heat comes across me like a flat hand. I think about the notebook with the blue cover in my desk drawer, and I think, I never once got to say out loud that it was mine. Then everything stops. Then I open my eyes, and the ceiling above me is white and cold, and it is my ceiling, in my room, in the house on Cedar Hill, and there is a bird making noise outside the window. I sit up so fast, the room tips sideways. My hands are shaking. My hands are not burned. There is no ash under my fingernails and no smoke in my throat, only the ordinary taste of morning. The clock beside my bed says 7 in the morning, the 11th of April. The 11th of April. That is the day before the spring gala. That is 3 years before the night I just died in. I know this day the way you know a scar on your own hand. This is the morning my father brings the transfer papers down to breakfast and asks me to sign my invention over to my sister for tax reasons. I signed them. In the life that just ended, I signed them at that table with a pen he handed me across the butter, and 3 years later, that same girl burned me alive inside a building full of my own safety equipment. I get up, I go to my desk and open the second drawer, and the notebook with the blue cover is there, exactly where it lives, full of my handwriting from when I was 19 and had no idea what my family actually was. I hold it against my chest with both arms and I make myself breathe until my hands go quiet. Then something colder moves in behind the shaking and takes the wheel. If I get the day back, then I get all of it back. The patent, my name. My parents can keep on being what they are. That part is finished. That is their business now and not mine. I go downstairs at 7:30 and everybody is already at the table because in this house, being late is a character flaw and being early is showing off. My father has a folder beside his plate. My mother is pouring coffee. Sienna is in a gray jumper with her hair up, looking about 17, eating half a piece of toast the way she has eaten half a piece of toast for 13 years. Adrian is there too, in a shirt at 8 in the morning on a Saturday, because Adrian Vance has eaten breakfast in this house since we were 15, and my mother thinks of him as a second son. He grins at me and says, I look like something the dog brought in. 3 years from now, this man will hold a fire door open for my sister every afternoon at 4 o'clock and never once wonder why. Today he pours my coffee. My father slides the folder across the table between the butter and the salt, and he does not look up while he does it, and that is the detail I remember from the first time. It is a formality, he says. The patent sits better in Sienna's name for the group structure. The tax position is cleaner. Sign the 2 flagged pages and eat your eggs. In the life that ended, I signed it. I was tired. I was proud that he had asked me for something. I remember thinking that a piece of paper does not change who built the thing. So this time I open the folder and I read all 4 pages at the table, slowly, out loud, while 5 people watch me and my eggs go cold. Page 3 is an assignment of the whole invention, in perpetuity, with all continuations, to Sienna Hollis personally, not to the company, not to the group. To a 22-year-old who studies hospitality management. I look up at my father and I ask him one question. I ask him which section of the box the sensor sits in, top plate or side wall, because I want to know if he has ever opened one. He tells me not to be clever at breakfast. My mother says my name in the voice she uses for a dog on furniture. Sienna puts down her toast and her eyes have already started to shine. I say no. 2 letters. The room goes so quiet I can hear the fridge. My father closes the folder very carefully, which is worse than shouting, and says, you will find that this family has been extremely patient with you. My mother says, Owen, your sister has been through enough. She has not been through anything, I say, and I say it in an ordinary voice, and that is the sentence that starts the war, because Sienna begins to cry immediately and beautifully, and without one single sound. Adrian gets up and puts his hand on her shoulder, and he looks at me the way you look at a man who has kicked something small, and I understand something I did not understand at 21. He was never going to choose me. He has been in this kitchen for 9 years, watching who gets the warm chair, and he is a man who wants a surname, and there is only one surname going. My mother follows me into the hall and tells me I have ruined the morning of the biggest day of my sister's life. I ask her what my sister is presenting tomorrow night. She says, the firebox, and I say, whose firebox? And she shuts the front door on the question. I walk to the bus stop at the end of Cedar Hill with a notebook in my bag and $11 in my pocket, and I start counting the things I know that nobody else in the world knows. I know that in 9 weeks, the licensing settlement account is going to lose $90,000 through a login that is not mine, and that in the life that ended, it was Noelle Park's login, and that they hung it on her. I know the woman who parks on Chalmers Street. I know that there is a fire investigator in this city called Dana Ruiz, who once looked at a smoke alarm with the battery in backwards and was told by everybody that people make mistakes when they are tired. And I know that my sister does the same thing every time, and that she has done it before, and that the only reason nobody has caught her is that nobody has ever been waiting. The first person I go to is Noelle Park, who is a licensing intern, 23 years old, who eats lunch on the wall outside Ferris Street because the canteen is loud. I sit down next to her and say, change your password today and file a memo with compliance about the settlement account and put the date and the time on it and keep a copy at home. She looks at me like I have asked her to swim the river. Mr. Hollis, she says, I am here 4 days a week and I do photocopying. I say, that is exactly why they are going to use you. Then I tell her the only thing that will make her do it, which is the truth. I say, if the money moves in June, it moves through your login, and there will be nothing on paper anywhere with your name on it except the transfer. She changes her password at 4:40 that afternoon. She files one boring page with compliance at 4:55. 9 weeks later, that page is the reason she still has a job, and I still have a life, and neither of us knows it yet. That night, I do the second thing, and the second thing is the one that gets me thrown out of a building. The fire service on Delroy Street has a front desk, and a woman behind it who is not paid enough to be interested in me, and I ask to speak to whoever handles investigations, and I use the word arson, which is a mistake. Fire Marshal Dana Ruiz comes out after 19 minutes. She is about 30, in a work shirt with a coffee stain on the cuff, and she looks at me the way you look at a delivery you did not order. I have 4 minutes and I know it. I say, 6 years ago, in a town 90 minutes north, a garage went up with a 19-year-old girl asleep above it, and the smoke alarm came off the ceiling with the battery in backwards. She does not move. I say, 11 years ago, there was a kitchen fire in another state with a foster placement in progress, and the child out of the house that night. I say, 9 years ago, there was another one. Ruiz asks me how I know that, and here is my problem, and it is going to be my problem for 6 months. The honest answer is that I know it because I died on the 9th of October 3 years from now, and a dead man cannot file a report. So I lie, badly, and I say I read it somewhere. She lets the lie sit on the counter between us for about 4 seconds, which is long enough for both of us to look at it. Then she says, "Mr. Hollis, go home." She says, "I have 2 live scenes and a court date, and a young man with a theory is not a case, and a battery is not evidence, and none of those fires are in my state." I say one more thing on my way out, because I have nothing to lose, and about 3 years to fill. I say, when you get one of these with 14 cameras on it and the audio clean, do not let anybody tell you it is a family matter. She does not answer, but she watches me all the way to the door, and she does not go back inside until I am across the road, and I file that away and I keep walking. The spring gala is at the Variant on the 12th of April, 300 people, black tie, my father's favorite night of the year, because it is the one night when everybody in this city has to stand in a room and look at him. Sienna is presenting. There is a screen and a stand and one of my boxes on a plinth with a light on it, and the program says, developed under the direction of Sienna Hollis, and my mother has that program in her handbag to keep. I stand at the back with a glass of water because I have not slept, and I watch my sister do 11 minutes on a machine she has never opened, and she is very good, and the room loves her. She says the words heat signature, and she says the words peace of mind, and she says the words our family, and she says all of them in the right order with the right pauses, and nobody in that room can tell the difference. Then she asks if there are questions, and my father is beaming, and I put my hand up, and my mother turns around in the second row and finds me with her eyes, and her face goes flat. I ask her one question. I ask her to explain, for the room, why the sensor sits in the top plate and not the side wall. It is not a trick. It is the first thing you learn about that box. Any of my 3 technicians could answer it drunk. Sienna looks at me for 2 seconds, and then she smiles and says, "That is quite technical, and my brother loves to be technical." The room laughs. It is a warm laugh. It is a laugh at me, and it does not sound unkind at all, which is the thing about this family. They have never once needed to raise their voices. So I ask it again, top plate or sidewall, and why? And the room stops laughing, because now they can all hear that she has not answered. She says something about the design team. She says something about wanting to keep it accessible. Somewhere on my left, a woman in a green dress says, "Oh," out loud, and that one syllable does more damage than anything I say all night. Then I take the notebook out of my jacket, and I open it on the table, and I read 3 lines of my own handwriting into the microphone that is standing there, because a microphone is always standing there. I read the date, which is 4 years old. I read the line about convection above the plate. I read my own name at the bottom of the page in my own hand, and then I hold the page up so that the camera at the back can have it. 300 people, 4 journalists. A man called Roe at the press table, who writes for exactly nobody and reads absolutely everything, and who is, right now, taking a photograph of a page of a notebook. My father is standing up. Sienna's eyes fill in about 1 second, which I have seen her do since she was 10, and she says into the microphone, in a small voice, that she is sorry, that she should not have taken the credit. And that is the move. That is the whole move, and I did not see it coming, even having died once, because she does not deny it. She agrees with me, and she cries, and she hands the room a girl who is being bullied by her brother. My mother reaches her first, then my father. then Adrian, who steps up onto the low stage and puts himself between my sister and the room, and turns and looks at me, and whistles 2 notes through his fingers the way he does at football. The room applauds her. I stand in the middle of 300 people holding a 4-year-old page of my own handwriting, and they applaud the woman who took it, and somebody behind me says, "Poor girl, she did not have to admit that." I leave through the kitchens. I am in the car park with my tie in my pocket when my phone goes, and it is Marta, who has cleaned that house for 19 years and who has never once called me at night. She says one sentence. She says, "The woman is here." At midnight, I am parked on Chalmers Street with the lights off, 200 meters back, watching a gray car under the second lamp with my heart going like a fist on a door. My sister is standing beside the open passenger door in her coat, still in the green dress from the stage, and there is a woman in the driver's seat with the window down. I cannot hear one word. What I can see is my sister's hands, which are moving fast and angry, and the woman's hand coming out of the window to take my sister's wrist and hold it still. I have watched my sister cry in front of 300 people tonight. I have never seen her stand like this, small, listening, head down, while somebody talks at her. I photograph the plate. I photograph the woman's face when she leans forward into the lamplight, and even at that distance I can see it. And once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. She has my sister's mouth. She has my sister's exact way of tipping her head. She is somewhere in her 50s, and she is not a social worker, and she is not an old friend from a county home. My sister came into our house at 10 years old with a story about a car accident on the Falmer Road, and my mother has told that story at parties for 13 years, and it has been a lie for every single one of them. Rose Piece goes up at 6 the next morning. The headline is 4 words long, and it is a question. And by 9, that question has been read 41,000 times. Whose handwriting is that? He does not accuse anybody of anything, because he is too good for that. He prints the date on my notebook page, and the date my sister says she started drawing boxes, and lets the reader do the subtraction. By 10 in the morning, the trade forums have found the patent filing, and the name on it. By noon, somebody has pulled the university records showing which Hollis took materials science and which one took hospitality management. At 1 o'clock, my badge stops working at the Ferris Street door. I swipe it 3 times while a security man I have known for 6 years looks at his shoes and says, "I am sorry, Mr. Owen, it came from the top." At 2 o'clock, my father's assistant calls to tell me I am suspended on full pay pending a review of my conduct at a company event. Conduct, she says, and I can hear exactly how much she hates saying it. At 3, my mother calls, and this one is built to hurt, and it works. "Your sister has not eaten since last night," she says. "She was sick twice this morning. Are you happy now?" I ask her one question, because I want to know whether there is anything left in there at all. "Mom," I say, "did you ever, one single time, ask her to explain how the box works?" There is a silence long enough to hear the kitchen clock. Then she says, "That is not the point, Owen." I say, "It is the only point." She hangs up on me for the first time in her life, and I stand in my kitchen and laugh, which frightens me a little. At 4 o'clock, the licensing settlement account at Hollis Systems moves $90,000 to an outside account in 3 transfers, and the login used is mine. I do not know that yet. I find out at 7 the next morning, when 2 officers knock on the door of my flat on Wells Street, politely, at exactly the hour when every neighbor in the building is leaving for work. They are not unkind. They stand in the hall while I put my shoes on. The younger one keeps saying they only need a statement, and the older one keeps saying nothing at all, and I know which of the 2 is telling the truth. The stairwell is full of my neighbors. Mrs. Okafor from the 3rd floor is holding her groceries against her chest and staring. Somebody films it from the landing above, and it is online before I reach the car. At the station, they show me the 3 transfers. 30,000, 30,000, 30,000, all inside 11 minutes, all authorized with my login and my 2-step code, from a terminal on the 4th floor at Ferris Street. I say the only thing I have. I say, I was not in that building at 4 o'clock yesterday, because my badge was canceled at 1. Then I say, check the badge log and check whose badge opened the 4th floor door at 3:51. The detective writes it down without any expression at all. His name is Alvarez, and he has done this 1,000 times, and he believes exactly none of it yet, and that is fine, because he does not have to believe me. Then he tells me the part that is designed to break people, and it very nearly works. He tells me the complaint was filed by the company at 5 o'clock yesterday, signed by the chairman. My father signed a criminal complaint against me 13 hours after I read my own handwriting out loud in front of 300 people. They let me go at 11 with no charge and a request not to travel. I walk out into the car park and my mother is standing by her car, and for about 4 seconds, I am stupid enough to feel relief. She has come to tell me that if I return the money quietly by Friday, the family will withdraw the complaint, and none of this needs to follow me around forever. I look at my mother in the car park of a police station. Mom, I say, I did not take it. I know you did not mean to, she says, which is somehow worse than any other sentence she could have picked. You have been under pressure, she says. You have been saying strange things. Your father thinks you should see someone. Sienna is the one who begged us to keep it quiet, Owen. She cried for you. That is when I stopped being sad about my parents. It happens quickly and quietly, like a door closing in another room, and afterwards everything in my chest is very clear and very cold. I say, I want you to remember this conversation exactly as it happened. There will be a day when you have to tell somebody about it, and I want you to get the details right. My phone goes while I am still in that car park, and it is a number I do not know. And a woman says, Mr. Hollis, this is Dana Ruiz, and I would like you to explain something to me. She says, 9 days ago, you stood in my lobby and used the word arson at me. This morning, you are on the internet in handcuffs over $90,000. Talk. I tell her the truth as far as I am allowed to tell it, which is that the money moved through my login while my badge was dead, and that in about 6 months, somebody is going to try something much worse than a bank transfer. She asks how I know. I say, I cannot tell you that in a way you would accept. She says, then we are going to have a short relationship. I say that is what I said to the last 4 people, and every one of them called me back. There is a pause on the line. Then Ruiz says, when the badge log comes out, send it to me and not to a journalist. Then she hangs up before I can say thank you, which I learn later is just how she ends calls. Then I take the bus home because my car is still at the Varant, and I sit on that bus with my hands in my lap and lay out the next 90 days like a man putting tools on a bench. Here is what my sister does not know, and it is the only advantage I have. She has moved her theft 9 weeks early, and everything she does early, she does with the wrong information. In the life that ended, the 90,000 went missing in the 3rd week of June from Noel Park's login, and Noel had never written a memo, and there was nothing on paper anywhere in the world. This time, Noel changed her password on the 11th of April at 4:40 in the afternoon and filed one boring page with compliance. So my sister could not use Noel, so she used me instead. To use me, she had to do 3 things that leave marks. She had to get into a building with a badge, she had to sit at a terminal that logs its own keyboard sessions, and she had to send the money somewhere. That afternoon, I do not call a lawyer. I call Ellis in compliance, a careful man of about 50 who has worked at Hollis Systems for 19 years and who has never once been invited to the gala. Mr. Ellis, I say, you have a memo from Noel Park dated the 11th of April. He says, I am not able to discuss internal documents with a suspended employee. Then he says, in a completely different voice, do not lose your copy of it. At 6 the next morning, Noel Park is standing outside my building with 2 coffees and a face like she has not slept. You were right, she says. You were right about the money, and you were right about the week it would move. I told compliance about the memo, she says, and yesterday they put a hold on my termination, and this morning there was a letter for me from Human Resources that they had to take back. She is shaking. Mr. Hollis, she says, if I had not written that page, would it have been me in that car park? Yes, I say, and there is no kind way to say it, so I do not try. It would have been you. Then she does the thing that changes the shape of the next 3 months. She sits down on the step, drinks half of my coffee by mistake, and says, all right, then tell me what you need, and I will go and get it. What I need is the badge log for the 4th floor between 3 and 4 in the afternoon on the 12th of April. What I need is the terminal session log. What I need is the receiving bank on those 3 transfers. Noelle cannot get any of it, and we both know that. She is a licensing intern with red access to 1 account. What she can do is much simpler and much better, and it takes her 4 days. She goes down to the 4th floor at 10 past 4 every afternoon with a stack of paper, and she watches who props the fire door with the plastic wedge. and she writes the times in a notebook like a person counting birds. On the fourth day, she calls me and says one name, and she says it carefully, the way you hand somebody something sharp. She says, "It is Adrian." He props it at 4 every day for the smokers, and it stays propped until about 1/2 past. Adrian Vance. 9 years of breakfasts in my mother's kitchen. Best man at a wedding I have not had yet. He has been holding a door open for my sister every afternoon without ever once thinking about why she needs it. I sit down on my own floor with the phone in my hand for a while after that call. It is not the patent that does it. It is a plastic wedge and a man who is too comfortable to look sideways. That is how she got in. Now I need the terminal, and for that I need somebody with a badge and a reason to be on that floor, and I have exactly one of those left in the whole building. Marta's nephew Daniel works in facilities. He is 26, he changes light fittings, he has a baby who does not sleep, and he has a master badge because somebody has to get into a room when a bulb dies. I do not ask Daniel to steal anything, and I want to be very clear about that because everything I do from here is going to be read by lawyers with magnifying glasses, and I know it. What I ask Daniel to do is file a ticket. On the 17th of April, he reports that the 4th floor fire door has been propped open with a wedge on multiple occasions, which is a genuine safety violation and which is genuinely true. Facilities are required to answer that ticket by pulling the door sensor history for the previous 14 days and attaching it to the report. Nobody has to be persuaded of anything. It is simply what the form says. The report goes into the system on the 18th. It shows the 4th floor fire door held open at 3:51 on the 12th of April for 6 minutes and 40 seconds. It also shows on the same afternoon at 4:12 a badge swipe on the interior door of the licensing office. The badge belongs to Sienna Hollis, who was supposedly at home being sick. I want to drive to Cedar Hill and put it on the kitchen table between the salt and my mother's hand and stand there while she reads it. I want that more than I have wanted anything since I woke up in my own bed. I have died once already because I trusted the people at that table, and this time I am not going to spend a weapon just to feel better for one evening in a nice kitchen. So on the 18th of April, I photograph the report and send it to Detective Alvarez with 2 lines of text, and I send the same photograph to Dana Ruiz because she asked first. Then the 9 days start, and my family uses every one of them. My sister calls me at 11 o'clock that same night from a number I do not know. Her voice is the one she uses for waiters, warm, a little tired, a good woman at the end of a long day. She says she is not angry with me. She says she has told Mom that none of this is my fault. Then she says she saw a girl carrying 2 coffees into a building on Wells Street at 6 in the morning last week. Is that allowed, she says? An intern visiting a suspended employee. Licensing is a very small department, Owen, and people do notice, and I would hate for somebody young to get pulled into all of this. Then she asks about the notebook. She says Mom told her I have been carrying that old blue thing everywhere in my bag and that I really ought to put it somewhere safe, because Wells Street is not a safe building. I thank her for calling. I put the phone face down on the table and I sit still for about 4 minutes while my heart does something stupid in my chest. And then I get up and I get my coat. At 2 in the morning, I walk to the coach station on Mercer Street with the notebook inside a cereal box inside a supermarket bag. Locker 41, $11 a week, and a small brass key that goes on my house keys. At 7 the next morning, there are 4 officers at my door with a warrant. Mrs. Okafor from the 3rd floor is on the landing with her groceries again, and somebody films it again, because of course, somebody does. They are looking for the $90,000 and for anything that moved it. They take my laptop, both phones, a drive the size of a playing card, and a shoebox with 6 weeks of my handwriting in it. A young officer photographs my kitchen. Another one photographs the inside of my fridge. I stand in the hall in a coat over a shirt I slept in, answering everything in a flat voice, and I do not sit down once in 2 hours. The older one pulls open the 2nd drawer of my desk, where a blue notebook has lived since I was 19 years old, and it is empty, and I look at the wall until I am certain my face has finished moving. Then he reads out the part of the application that got the warrant signed. It quotes a statement from the chairman of Hollis Systems that his son has been unwell for some months and may not be acting rationally. My father put that sentence into a police document. I stand in my own hall and listen to my own father's job title being used to search my rooms, and the officer reading it looks at the paper and not at me. And then I understand the phone call, and I have to put my hand flat on the door frame. That was not a warning. My sister was not being kind to me at 11 o'clock at night. She was checking where the notebook sleeps. She wanted it lying in that drawer at 7 in the morning, so that 4 officers would carry it out of my flat in a sealed bag into an evidence room, and I would never put my hands on it again as long as I lived. That afternoon, a woman from the certification board calls me and reads a rule number out loud twice before she gets to the sentence, which is that my registration as a fire safety engineer is suspended pending the criminal matter. She is kind about it. She says it is automatic. She says it is not a finding against me. What it means is that my signature is worth nothing on any document in this country, and I am the man who designed the boxes. I ask her how long these things take. She says between 6 and 9 months usually. I say thank you, and I hang up, and I stand in my kitchen with my hand still on the phone for longer than I want to admit. All week the family closes ranks the way I knew it would. My father tells the board I have had a breakdown. My mother tells the neighbors I am getting help. It is all very gentle, and it is all completely deliberate. On the 21st, they come for Daniel. Facilities put him on a disciplinary for misuse of the ticket system and move him to nights at the Holloway site, 40 minutes each way. And he is 26 and his baby still does not sleep. Marta calls me and cries down the phone and tells me her nephew has done nothing wrong. She is right. He filled in a safety form because I asked him to, and that is the whole of his crime, and I sit down on my own stairs to hear it. I put Daniel on the list under Tom and Noel. Every name on that list is there because somebody helped me. It is a thing I am going to have to carry for a while, and I would still rather carry it than put the list down. The same day, the bank puts a hold on my personal account because of the police matter. My suspension pay does not arrive, and a man in a call center calls it an administrative issue and offers to raise a case. That leaves me a biscuit tin with $1,100 in it and a landlord who has watched the video. He comes up that evening and stands in my doorway with his hat in his hands and says the other tenants are frightened. I pay him 2 months up front out of the tin, $800, and he counts it twice on my kitchen table without once looking at my face, and I am left with $300 and a bus pass. On the 22nd, Adrian comes to see me. He stands in my hallway in a good coat and does not sit down, and he tells me that he and Sienna are together now, as though he is handing me a difficult gift. He says she was 17 and grieving. He says the family is prepared to be generous if I stop. He says, "Mate, you are burning your whole life down over a page in a notebook," and I can hear that he has practiced the word mate. I ask him one question. I ask him what she has told him about the Falmer Road. He says, "What is the Falmer Road?" I say, "Ask her tonight and watch her face," and then I close the door with him still standing there. That afternoon, Elias Kane calls me for the first time. He runs Kane Industrial. He was going to sign a supply agreement with my father in 9 days, and he does not ask about the arrest, which I appreciate more than any sympathy I have been offered. He says, "My people opened all the Hallberg certificates. Page 104 and page 116 are the same block of text. There are 9 more like it further in." Then he says, "We did not sign." Then he says, "You have cost a great many people a great deal of money this month, Mr. Hollis, and I do not think you have started yet." I ask him whether the offer of a room and 20 minutes still stands. He says it does, and then he says the thing that makes me put my hand flat on the table. He says, "But you are going to need more than a room. Right now, you are a suspended employee with a police file. If you walk into any room in this city today, they will listen to you the way they listen to weather." He is right, and I hate that he is right. I have the truth and no floor to stand on. I have a patent with the wrong name, a company that has locked me out, and a family that has told the whole city I am unwell. So I stop trying to be believed, and I start building something they will have to answer to, whether they believe me or not. And the first brick of it is a phone call I make that night at 11. I call the licensing manager at Reading General Hospital, a woman named Priya Sen, who has bought 412 of my boxes over 6 years and who once wrote me a card after a kitchen fire on a geriatric ward. "Mrs. Sen," I say, "in October, your service contract with Hollis Systems comes up for renewal. Before you sign it, I would like to tell you who is going to be holding that patent by then and why it matters to your lawyers." And then I tell her the truth, in order, with dates, for 40 minutes, on a recorded line that she asks permission to keep, And at the end of it, she says the sentence that changes my whole autumn. She says, "Mr. Hollis, I have 11 other hospitals in my buying group." Before she hangs up, I tell her myself that my registration is suspended because a woman who finds that out on her own later will never trust me again. She says, that is a board covering itself, and carries on making her list. On the 23rd, Dana Ruiz calls me about the badge log. She tells me flatly that it is worth nothing, that half that building shares logins, and that a swipe is not a keystroke and never has been. Then she says, "But I have a question, and it has been annoying me for 3 days. In my lobby, you said 14 cameras and clean audio, not some cameras. 14. Why did you pick that number?" I stand in my kitchen holding a phone in a flat with no laptop in it, and I think because that is how many I am going to buy, and I cannot say that. So I say nothing at all for about 6 seconds. Louise says, "That is what I thought." Then she says, "I am not your friend, and I am not investigating anything of yours. But if a fire ever happens near you, call me before you call anybody else." And then she hangs up. On the 25th, my sister posts a photograph of 2 empty chairs at the kitchen table with a caption about missing someone who is still alive. It gets 9,000 hearts. Rose screenshots it and does not print it, and I like him more every week. On the 27th, Alvarez calls me for the first time since the station. He asks 4 dull questions in the dull voice, and then he asks one that is not his, and he knows it is not his while he is saying it. He asks whether there is any medical history I would like to tell him about. I ask him who offered him one. He does not answer that, and the pause he leaves in the middle of that call is the most honest thing anybody has given me in 2 weeks. Alvarez goes to Fair Street on the 29th of April with the facilities report in his folder, and he spends 4 hours in a meeting room asking dull questions in that same dull voice. Why stockton koi on the sides? I am not there. I hear it 2 ways, from Noel, who watches the door, and from Ellis in compliance, who tells me nothing at all in a tone that tells me plenty. My sister explains the badge swipe without 1 second of hesitation. She says, I gave her my login weeks ago because I was overwhelmed, and that she went to the licensing office that day to collect a folder for our mother. She cries at the right moment. She apologizes for crying. She says she does not want her brother to be in trouble and asks whether the family can simply pay the money back into the account and be finished with all of it. Alvarez writes it all down. He is not stupid and he is not moved, but he does not have a case because a badge swipe is not a keystroke, and everybody in that office shares everything with everybody. 2 days later, Hollis Systems withdraws the criminal complaint. My father does it in a letter of 4 lines that calls it a family matter, and the money is quietly returned to the account by the company itself. Then he calls me, for the first time in 19 days, to tell me that he has shown me mercy. That is the word he uses. He says, I have protected you, Owen, and I expect you to understand what that cost me. Dad, I say, you signed a complaint against your son and then canceled it when it started pointing the wrong way. That is not mercy. That is housekeeping. He hangs up, and that makes 2 parents in 1 month, and it does not hurt the second time. The complaint dies, but the story does not, because that is the thing about being walked out of your own building by 2 officers at 7 in the morning while a neighbor films it from the landing. The video has been watched 200,000 times. The comments are certain. A rich boy stole from his own family and got out of it because of who his father is, and half of the internet has already decided who I am. Elias Kane was right. I have the truth and know where to stand while I say it. So I go and get a floor, and my floor is a 79-year-old woman in a cold house on the north side of the river who has been waiting 11 years for a reason. Aunt Ruth Hollis is my father's older sister. She owns 9% of the company and has not spoken to him since a board meeting 11 years ago, and she answers the door in a coat because she does not heat the front rooms. She looks at me on her step for a long moment, so she says, they finally did it to you too. Come in and do not touch the cat. Ruth built the first version of Hollis Systems with my grandfather, when it was fire doors and extinguisher servicing and nothing clever at all. She was pushed off the board for asking about a supplier my father liked. She makes tea and puts a plate of biscuits between us and says, tell me all of it and do not tidy it up for an old woman. So I tell her all of it and I do not tidy it. and she listens without moving for 50 minutes. When I finish, she says, "The fire in your dream. Say that part again." And I realize I have told her about dying out loud without planning to, and I sit there waiting for her to reach for the telephone and call my mother. She does not. She says, "My mother had dreams. Everyone in this family called her difficult until the day the roof came off the paint shed exactly the way she said it would." Then she leans forward. "Now the thing you actually came for," she says. "You want to know about the girl. So we are going to talk about the day your parents brought her home, because I was there and your mother was not thinking straight." Ruth tells me that in the spring 13 years ago, my mother lost a baby at 6 months and that it broke something, and that for 8 months she did not leave the house on Cedar Hill. Then a woman came to the church coffee morning once and told a story about a child in a county home whose parents had died in a car on the Falmer Road. And my mother came home from that coffee morning lit up like a window. 6 weeks later, there was a girl in the spare room. Ruth says the paperwork moved faster than any paperwork she had seen in 50 years of business, and that when she asked why, she was told not to spoil it. "What was the woman's name?" I ask. Ruth stirs her tea. She says, "I asked that question at the time, and I got no answer, and I have thought about it perhaps 400 times since." Then she gets up, goes to a sideboard, and comes back with a shoebox of photographs. She puts one in front of me. It is the first Christmas, 13 years ago, in my parents' front room. There is my mother, with a face I do not recognize because it is happy. There is my father in a paper crown. There is me at 11, all elbows, holding a wrapped box I do not remember. And there is Sienna at 10, in a red dress, sitting on the arm of my mother's chair. She is not looking at the camera or the tree or the presents. She's looking at my mother's face, sideways, with total concentration. It is the face of somebody at work. Ruth taps the photograph with one finger. 13 years, she says. A child in a house does not learn a woman's face that fast unless somebody has taught her that it is a job. Then she tells me the thing that makes my hands go cold, and she tells it in the flat voice of a woman who has been holding it a long time and has been waiting for somebody worth telling. 4 years ago, she says, I hired a man to look at the county home, not for you. For me, because I am spiteful and I had the time. The home closed the year after your parents adopted her, and the records went to storage. Found one thing before I told him to stop, she says, because I was frightened of what it meant, and I was an old woman alone in a house. There was no accident on the Falmer Road that year. No accident, I say. None, she says. No car, no report, no funeral, no 2 people. The county home had her under a different surname, and the woman who brought her in signed the form as a family friend. Do you have the name, I ask, and my voice does not sound like mine. Ruth looks at me over her cup for a long time, and then she says, drink your tea first, boy, because you will not want to afterwards. Then she says it. The name on the form was Ivy Marsh. I put the photograph I took on Chalmers Street on the table between us. Ruth holds it at arm's length under the lamp, and her jaw moves, and she says, well, that is the woman from the coffee morning, she says. 13 years, and I would know that face at 100 paces. She sat next to your mother and cried about a child she had never met. We sit in that cold room for a while, without saying anything at all. The cat gets on the table. Ruth does not stop it. Then she says, what do you want from me? And be specific, because I am old and I have no time for hinting. 9%, I say, not the shares. Your vote in October at the annual meeting and your name on a letter to the board that I will write and you will read before you sign. She smiles for the first time all afternoon. It is not a nice smile, and it looks exactly like my father's. Bring me the letter, she says, and bring me something to hit him with. I have been waiting 11 years. The man Ruth hired 4 years ago is called Ray. He is 60 and does insurance work, and he wants nothing at all to do with any of this until I say 2 words to him on the telephone. I say, Ivy Marsh, and he goes quiet, and then he says, I will meet you somewhere with a car park I can see from the window. Ray. Ray brings a folder to a cafe on the south side and does not order anything. He tells me he stopped 4 years ago because Ruth got frightened and that he never threw the file away, which is the sentence that saves my whole autumn. Ivy Marsh is 56 years old. She has been bankrupt twice under 2 spellings of her own name. She has no criminal record of any kind, which he says is the interesting part rather than the dull part. Then he lays out 3 photographs of 3 different houses in 3 different towns and asks me to tell him what they have in common. And I look at them and my mouth goes dry. They are all burned. Not the same year, not the same state. 11 years ago, 9 years ago, and 6 years ago. 2 kitchen fires and 1 garage. 2 of them paid out under $100,000. One of them paid out $480,000. And in each of those 3 houses, Ray says, at the time of the fire, there was a foster placement or an adoption in progress, and in each case, the child was not there that night. And in each case, the placement quietly ended afterwards. Was it her, I ask? Was it the same girl? Ray shakes his head. He says the names are all different, and the records for minors are sealed, and he could never prove it, and he is not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. Then he says the thing he actually came to say, which is that in the last of those 3 houses, 6 years ago, a 19-year-old girl named Hannah Beckett was asleep upstairs when the garage went up. She got out with burns to one arm. She has never spoken to a journalist. She still lives about 90 minutes north, and Ray has her address in that folder, and he has never once used it. Why did you keep it? I ask. He looks at me with tired eyes and says, because I have a daughter, Mr. Hollis, and because Ruth Hollis is not the only person in this city who was frightened. I drive north the next morning. I do not tell Kane, I do not tell Noelle, I do not tell Ruth. If I am wrong about this, then I want to be wrong on my own. In a car, 90 minutes from anybody who knows my name. Hannah Beckett works in a garden center outside Marlow Bay. She has a scar from the wrist to the elbow on her right arm, silver now, the kind that has stopped hurting and never stops being looked at. I say her name, and she puts down the tray she is holding. I say, my name is Owen Hollis, and I want to ask you about the girl who lived in your house 6 years ago. And Hannah Beckett walks straight out of the shop. I follow her into the car park, which is the sort of thing that gets a man in trouble, so I stop 10 paces back and say the only thing I have, which is, she set a fire around me too, and she stood over me and told me what she had done. Hannah Beckett turns around. She is crying and furious at the same time, and she says, I told 9 people. I told the police twice. My own mother told me I was jealous of her. Do you understand what that did to my life? Yes, I say. I understand it exactly. And she looks at my face for a while, and whatever she finds there is enough, because she says, not here, and gives me an address and tells me to come at 8. At 8 o'clock, in a kitchen with a low ceiling, Hannah Beckett tells me about a girl her parents took in when she was 18. A quiet, sweet, helpful girl with a beautiful smile who had lost her parents in a car accident. She tells me about small things going missing and turning up in her own room, about her mother saying, Hannah, why are you being like this? About being the difficult daughter in her own house inside 4 months. And she tells me about the night of the fire and the one detail that puts every hair on my arms up, because it is not a thing anybody could invent twice. The smoke alarm in that house was 6 years old, and it had a 9-volt battery, and Hannah changed it herself in the spring. And when the investigators pulled it off the ceiling, the battery was in it backwards. Battery does not turn itself around. Hannah told the investigator that. He wrote it down, and he explained kindly that people make mistakes when they are tired, and that was the end of it, and her arm still looks like that. I sit in her kitchen and think about 19 boxes on a ceiling being muted from an admin panel at 9:40 at night, and I understand that I am not dealing with a jealous sister who went too far. I am dealing with a trade. It has a method and a history, and a woman who parks on Chalmers Street, and I have been living inside it since I was 11 years old and holding a wrapped box in a red room at Christmas. Before I go, Hannah asks me what I am going to do. I tell her the truth, which is that I am going to take everything my sister has, slowly, in public, and then hand her to the police in front of a camera. Hannah Beckett looks at her own arm for a moment and then says, if you need me to stand up in a room and say it out loud, call me. I have been ready for 6 years, and nobody has ever asked. That is the 4th debt on the list. Tom, Noelle, Daniel, Hannah. I write the 4 names on the back of Ray's folder in the car, and under them I write the 2 names that owe me instead, and then I drive south. I get back into the city at 1 in the morning, and I do not go home. I drive to Delroy Street, and I sit in the car park of the fire service until Dana Ruiz comes off shift at 6:30. She sees me and stops walking and says, absolutely not. I hold up the folder and say, 3 houses, 11 years, 9 years, 6 years, and 1 girl with a scar on her right arm who will talk to you. Ruiz says she cannot open cases in another state, that none of this is hers, that she has a court date, and that I have picked the exact wrong person to bring a folder to. Then she takes it and reads it, standing up in a car park for 40 minutes. When she finishes, she does not say anything for a while. Then she says, the battery. And I say, yes. And she says, in 19 years, I have argued with 2 people about a battery. And one of them was a 19-year-old girl, and everybody in that room was very kind to her. She gives me the folder back. She says, this is not a case, and I am not taking it, and I want you to understand that. Then she says, but I am going to keep the page with the alarms on it, and she tears it out in front of me and folds it into her pocket. From the 1st of May, I stop defending myself and start taking things. And the first thing I take is the only thing my family has never understood, which is the difference between a patent and a name on a patent. I walk to the coach station on Mercer Street and open locker 41 and lift out a cereal box, and 11 days in there have made the blue covers smell of diesel. And I carry it across the city on a bus like a man carrying an organ for transplant. Ellen Farrow is a patent lawyer with a small office and a big voice, and she reads that notebook for 2 hours without speaking. And then she takes her glasses off and says, oh, this is going to be fun. Here is the law, she says, and I want you to hear it the way a judge hears it. A patent must name the true inventor. If it knowingly names the wrong one, it is not merely embarrassing. It is worth nothing at all. If we file a correction and we win, she says, your name goes on it, and the ownership follows the assignment chain. And the assignment chain has a transfer you never signed, because you refused at breakfast on the 11th of April. And if we file and we lose, I saw a guy. Then you have publicly accused your family of fraud and you own nothing, she says, and I like you, so I want you to sit with that for a night before you answer me. I do not need the night. I have already burned to death over this once. And nobody in that building will ever know it, and there is no version of the rest of my life where I sit quietly and let them keep it. File on the 6th of May. With the petition go 3 sworn declarations. Mine, Dr. Femi Adebayo, who supervised my materials project and read that notebook when I was 19 and wrote comments in the margin in green ink. And the third one is the one my father will never forgive, because it comes from Ellis in compliance, 19 years at Hollis Systems, and he attaches the memo from the 11th of April and the facilities report from the 18th. Rowe gets the filing on the 7th, because filings are public, and he is the only journalist in this city who actually reads them. And by the 8th, the question in his headline is not a question anymore. On the 9th of May, Reading General puts its October renewal on hold pending clarification of title. Priya Sen makes 11 telephone calls that morning, and by the following Tuesday, 9 of her buying group have done the same. And at that is 4,100 boxes and about $6 million of service revenue sitting perfectly still. And Hollis Systems has payroll on the last day of every month like everybody else in the world. On the 12th of May, I register a company of my own. It is called Ninefold. It has 1 director and no employees. And it exists so that everything I do from here has a name on it that is not my father's. On the 14th, Kane Industrial announces it will not be proceeding with the Hollis supply discussion at this time. 2 lines on a website, no reason given. Elias Kane does not call me and does not need to. On the 21st, the bank asks my father for a meeting about the facility, which is what a bank calls it when it is deciding whether to end your life politely and with coffee. My father is a proud man who has never once in his career been in a room where he was not the largest thing in it. In 3 weeks, he loses about 1/3 of his revenue, and every telephone call he makes goes to voicemail. So he does the only thing left in his hand. He invites me to dinner at the house on Cedar Hill on the 2nd of June, and my mother cooks the lamb, and Sienna is not there when I arrive, which is a decision somebody made. Adrian is there. Adrian is sitting in my chair, in a shirt I have not seen, pouring the wine like a man who lives here, and my mother touches his shoulder on her way past exactly the way she used to touch mine. Table is set for 4. There are flowers. My mother hugs me at the door and holds on about 2 seconds too long, and I stand there with my arms at my sides and let it happen without joining in. We eat for 11 minutes before my father puts his fork down, and here comes the offer. And I have to admit it is a good one, because he is a good businessman when he is frightened. Head of engineering, he says, a seat on the board, 12% of the equity, papered properly this time, and your name on the patent as first inventor with Sienna as second. And in return, I say, withdraw the petition, he says. Say publicly that it was a family misunderstanding, sign a settlement with a confidentiality clause, and let this company get back to work. before there is nothing left to run. My mother reaches across and puts her hand on my wrist and says the sentence she has been rehearsing all afternoon. Owen, she says, we can be a family again by Sunday. I look at her hand on my wrist. Then I ask them one question, slowly, because everything I do next depends on the answer, and I genuinely do not know what it is going to be. I say before I answer, just tell me one thing. Do you believe right now, tonight, sitting here in this kitchen, that Sienna took that $90,000? The silence goes 11 seconds. I count them. My father looks at the flowers. My mother's hand stays on my wrist and gets slightly heavier, and she says, in the gentlest voice in the world, does it matter now? It matters to me, I say. Then my father says the thing that ends it, and he says it in the voice of a reasonable man closing a file. He says, your sister has been through enough, Owen. Some things you put down for the good of everybody. Then I turn to Adrian and ask him whether he asked her about the Falmer Road. He puts the bottle down. He does not look at me, and he does not look at my mother. And that little movement of his eyes is the only honest thing at that table all evening. So I take my wrist back, and I fold my napkin, and I tell them no. And then I do the thing I actually came to this house to do, which is the only reason I accepted the invitation at all. I tell them where everything is. I tell them loudly and clearly that the original notebook, the dated prototype boards, the signed declarations, and the master archive of every sensor log we own are now in Unit 9 at the West Yard. Tell them the West Yard server is the only place the archive lives, because I moved it out of Ferris Street when they canceled my badge, and I let that last part slip out sideways with the wine like a man losing his temper. My father says the yard is company property. I say the unit is rented in my company's name. He says, what company? And I say Ninefold, registered on the 12th of May, and I watch him understand that I am not coming home. Everything I said at that table is true. That matters. Every single word of it is true, because a trap made of lies falls apart in a courtroom, and I did not spend 6 months on this to lose it to a technicality. What I did not say is that Unit 9 has 14 cameras, that Tom Buckley has been moved to the North Gate on my instruction, and that the archive writes to 2 houses 9 times a second and always has. And I did not say the last thing, which took me 3 weeks and Noel Park and a truly stupid amount of coffee, and which is the single best piece of work I have ever done in my life. I rewrote the firmware in the 19 boxes in that yard. If anybody mutes those horns from the admin panel, the horns go quiet exactly as expected, and the panel says muted, and everything looks obedient and normal. And a silent alert goes out to 4 phones, and the cameras start recording, and the log writes 1 extra line that says which account did it, from which machine, at what second. My sister has a method. She has used it in at least 3 houses, and she has never once been caught, because her method depends on the sensor being obedient and the door being shut and the family being certain. So I am not going to try to stop her. I am going to hold the door open and let her walk all the way in with a can in her hand, in the dark, on camera, while 9 readings a second write it down forever. I drive home to Wells Street that night, and I shake so hard I cannot get the key into the lock, because deciding to be bait feels quite different at midnight than it does at a dinner table with your mother's hand on your wrist. In June and July and August, my family comes apart in public, and I would like to tell you that I did not enjoy watching it, but I have been honest with you the whole way, and I am not going to start lying now. The bank moves the facility to a monthly review. 2 suppliers put us on prepayment. Roe publishes the county home records that Ray dug out 4 years ago, and the phrase there was, no accident on the Falmer Road, goes around this city like weather. My mother stops going to the church coffee morning. Marta tells me that on a Tuesday in July, my mother sat in the car in her own driveway for 2 hours without coming into the house. And on the 19th of July, my sister marries Adrian Vance in a registry office with 11 people and 400 photographs, and my father gives a speech about finally having a son in the business. Marta sends me the photographs because she thinks I should see them from a friend and not from the internet. In every single one, my mother is holding Adrian's arm, and my sister is watching my mother's face. 6 weeks later, Adrian Vance takes a seat on the board of Hollis Systems. 12 years of my life sat at that kitchen table, and the fastest way into my chair was to marry the girl who wanted it. He sends me one message on the night of the wedding. It says, "This did not have to happen." I look at it for a long time, and then I put the phone down without answering, because he is right and he does not know why. And then my sister goes on an apology tour, and it is genuinely masterful, and I want to describe it properly because you should know exactly what I was up against all autumn. She does not deny the notebook. She says, in a long, soft, beautifully written post, that she was 17 and grieving and desperate to be loved by the family that saved her, and that she let a story about herself get away from her. She says she has begun therapy. She says she has asked her brother for forgiveness and understands if it never comes. 40,000 people share it. 2 morning shows read it out loud in full, and one of them cries. For about 9 days, my sister is the brave one, and I am the cold, clever, rich son destroying his own family over a page of paper, and my former neighbors cross the road on Wells Street to avoid saying hello. And here is what I learned in those 9 days, and it is the only advice I have ever been able to give anybody about people like her. You cannot outtalk them. You will never outtalk them. Talking is the thing they are for. You can only build the one machine they cannot argue with, and then wait, with your hands folded until they walk into it themselves. Donna Ruiz comes to my flat in the middle of August, unannounced, at 7 in the evening, with a folder of her own and a face that says she has lost an argument with herself in the car. She stands in my kitchen and asks me to explain the firmware, so I explain the firmware. It takes 40 minutes, and she does not interrupt once, and at the end of it, she sits down at my table, which is the first thing she has ever done in my company that was not official. She says, "You have rewritten 19 commercial fire units so that they lie to an admin panel." I say, they do not lie. They obey the panel exactly, and then they also tell the truth to 4 telephones. She says, that is the same sentence with better manners. Then she says the thing she came to say. She says, either you are the most careful man I have ever met, or you are unwell in a way that is going to end with somebody dead. And I have spent 3 weeks failing to decide which. I ask her what would settle it. She says, nothing you can say. Then she looks at the ceiling of my kitchen where there is a white box with a green light, and she says, how many of those have you put in this building? 11, I say. She says, and how many exits does this floor have? 2, I say, and the second one comes out behind the bins. Ruiz nods slowly and says, all right, and drinks the tea she said she did not want. She has been in my flat 9 minutes, and she has looked at the extinguisher in the hall twice. I say, out loud, you find the extinguisher before you sit down, every room. You did it at the cafe, and you did it at the door. Ruiz stops with the cup halfway. She says, my father was a station officer for 22 years, and he never once sat with his back to a door, and I did not know I did that until about 4 seconds ago. Then she puts the cup down and stands up, and becomes a fire marshal again in the space of one breath, and says, if anything happens at that yard, you call me first, and you do not touch anything. And you do not be a hero. Austin saw scapegoats and sar yidas ikenshi I ends. I say, I am not going to be a hero. She looks at me from the door for slightly too long and says, Mr. Hollis, I have read your file, and you are exactly the sort of idiot who runs at a door. Autumn comes. On the 3rd of September, the annual meeting notice goes out, and Ruth Hollis signs the letter I wrote for her, and 11% of the room comes with her because she has been telephoning old men for a month. On the 12th of September, the Patent Office issues its preliminary finding on the correction of inventorship, and the finding says my name, and Ellen Farrow reads it to me over the phone twice because I ask her to. On the 29th of September, Priya Sen tells my father in writing that Reading General will renew in October only with the true patent holder, and that the buying group intends to move together. That letter is the end of Hollis Systems as a going concern, and everybody who receives a copy of it knows so, and one of the people who receives a copy of it is my sister, because I made absolutely sure of it. Then I do the last thing. On the 6th of October, I file the insurance schedule for Ninefold, and I file it in a way that puts one number in front of anybody who goes looking for it. The contents of Unit 9 at the West Yard, the archive, the prototypes, the original documents, are insured for $6 million, and my sister is a woman who has been reading other people's paperwork since she was 10 years old. The 9th of October is a Thursday. It rains until about 6. Tom Buckley starts his shift at the North Gate at 10 on my instruction, with a radio and a flask, and no idea that he is the reason any of this is happening at all. At 9:40 in the evening, the admin account belonging to Hollis Systems mutes 19 sensors in the West Yard, and 4 telephones in this city buzz at the same second, and one of them is in my hand. I am parked on Selby Road, 200 meters from the yard gate, with the engine off and the window down, and my hands flat on my knees so that I can feel them. The other 3 phones belong to Noel Park, to Ellen Farrow, and to Dana Ruiz, who spent 40 minutes in August telling me why she could not open an 11-year-old case in another state, and who then took a page of it home in her pocket. Ruiz does not believe me. I want to be fair to her. What Ruiz believes is that a battery does not turn itself around, and that a man who rewrites firmware to catch his own sister is either very right or very unwell, and she wants to know which. So there is one unmarked car on the far side of the yard with 2 tired officers in it who have been told to watch a gate for 3 nights, and who are eating sandwiches, and who expect absolutely nothing. At 9:41, my phone shows me camera 4. A car comes into the yard with its lights off. It stops beside Unit 9, next to my parked car, under the one lamp in that corner that I did not repair on purpose in September. The driver stays in the car. The passenger gets out in a dark coat with the hood up and gardening gloves on, and she walks around my car once, slowly, and touches the bonnet with the back of her hand to see if it is warm. It is warm. I drove it there at 8 o'clock and left it, with the lamp on inside the unit and my old phone on the desk playing music quietly, because a man working late plays music. She stands still for a moment, looking at the lit window. Then she goes back to the car and takes out 2 things, and on camera 4, you can see both of them very clearly, because I put that camera where I put it for a reason. One is a red 5-liter can, the other is a chain. She threads the chain through the 2 handles of the roller door and pulls it tight and clips it, and she does it quickly and neatly, like a woman who has done it before with her hands cold. I am watching my sister lock a door on a building she believes I am inside, and my whole body has gone so cold that I have to look down to check I am still holding the telephone. Then she starts talking, and this is the thing I did not plan for, and it is the thing that ends her. She talks the way people talk to a door, loudly, so that it carries, with her face close to the metal. 14 cameras in that unit have microphones, because they came as a set and I never bothered to turn the sound off. Owen, she says, I know you can hear the chain. She says, you should have signed the paper in April. Everything would have been quick and clean. Now it has to be slow, and honestly, that is your own fault. She says, I took the patent, and I would have kept it if you had stayed in your lab where you were useful. I took Adrian, and that one was so easy it was insulting. I took your parents in the first year, before you even knew there was a competition. And she says, and tonight I took the alarms, 19 sensors. Your sensors, Owen. I muted every one of them from the admin account at 9:40, and nobody will ever look because nobody ever looks. Word for word. 3 years early, at a locked door instead of over my body, and this time 19 boxes and 14 microphones and a copper wire out of that yard are writing every syllable into 2 houses at once. I hear my own dead voice in my head saying, that is what finally breaks something in my chest. And I sit in a cold car on Selby Road, and I do not cry, and I do not move, and I let her finish the list. She pours the can along the bottom of the roller door and around the side wall where the pallets are stacked, and she is careful with her shoes, and she checks her sleeve twice. At 9:46, she strikes it and steps back, and the whole corner of the yard goes orange, and the car with its lights off begins to reverse toward the gate before the flame is even properly up. At 9:46 and 11 seconds, 19 muted boxes that are not muted at all send their second alert, and every one of them writes the same line, and 40 kilometers away, a server in a rented rack writes it too. Ruiz gets it, the 2 tired officers get it, and the fire service gets it, because that is the other thing I changed in the firmware, and the first engine leaves the station on Delroy Street at 9:47. I start my car and drive to the gate, and I am about to do the sensible thing, which is stay in the vehicle and let 3 professionals work, when I see the torch beam coming down the yard from the north. Tom Buckley, 61 years old, 12 years of night shifts. He has seen the orange from the north gate, and he is running at it. And he is running at it because he thinks I am inside, because my car is parked outside that door. I am out of the car and shouting his name before I decide to be. He does not hear me. He gets to the roller door and grabs the chain with both hands and starts pulling, exactly the way he did on the night I died, on the same door, with the same chain. There is a side entrance to Unit 9 that my sister does not know about because it is not on any plan she has ever read, and there is a fire exit at the back that opens outward, and none of that matters at all if the man you are trying to save will not let go of a door. I hit him about as hard as I have ever hit anything, low at the waist, and he comes off that chain, and we both go down on the wet concrete, and something in the wall above us lets go and comes down in a sheet of heat. My right sleeve catches. I do not feel it as pain. I feel it as noise, as a loud thing happening beside my ear. And then Tom Buckley is lying on top of me, putting it out with his coat and swearing at me in a voice I have never heard him use. We are still on the ground when the two officers reach us and drag us backwards by the shoulders, and the first engine comes through the gate at 9:52 with its lights turning. I remember lying on the wet concrete, looking up at the orange, and thinking quite clearly, we are outside. Both of us are outside, and then somebody puts a blanket on me and I start to shake. They take me to St. Brendan's. The burn goes from my wrist to just below the elbow on the right arm, which is the same arm, and I do not notice that until Hannah Beckett points it out 3 weeks later, and neither of us knows what to do with our faces. Tom has a cut on his head and smoke in his chest, and they keep him overnight. At 2 in the morning, he sends me a message from his hospital bed that says, "Kid, why was your car parked there?" And I do not answer it for 11 hours because I do not know how to. Donna Ruiz gets to St. Brendan's at 3:30 in the morning with ash on her boots and stands at the end of the bed and looks at my arm for a while. She says, "You ran at a door." I say, "I did." She says, "I told you in your kitchen in August that you were exactly that kind of idiot." I say, "You did, and you were right, and I would like it on the record that I ran at a man and not at a door." Ruiz does not smile, but something happens at the corner of her mouth that is closer to it than anything I have got out of her in 6 months. And then she goes back to work and does not sleep for 2 days. Unit 9 burns for 4 hours. The prototypes go. The dated boards go. The 2 archive servers in the corner go. And the original notebook with the blue cover goes. All 91 pages of it. It was inside a fireproof box. That box was rated for exactly 30 minutes less than my sister was willing to give it. And I have thought about those 30 minutes more than is good for me. At 6 in the morning, Ruiz stands in the wet ash with a coffee and tells me that in 19 years, she has never had a fire scene handed to her from 14 angles with sound, and that she is going to need every one of them. And at 9 in the morning, before I have slept, before Ruiz has even filed her preliminary, my family gets there first. My father goes on the radio at 9:10. He says his son Owen has been suffering for months. He says that he took out an insurance policy on that unit for $6 million on the 6th of October, 3 days before it burned, and he says he begged him to get help. My mother's statement is worse because it is quieter. She says the family will not be commenting further, that they love their son, and that they hope he gets the support he needs. Every word of it is a knife with a ribbon on the handle. And my sister posts a photograph of herself at a hospital window with the caption, "My brother is alive. That is the only thing that matters today." And it is shared 60,000 times before lunch. By midday, I am the man who burned his own building for the money. It is on 3 news sites. The video of me being walked out of my flat in April is in every one of the pieces, because of course it is. The insurance company calls at 2 in the afternoon to advise me that the claim is under review and to remind me that arson for profit is a criminal matter. The bank at 9-fold freezes the account at 4. Priya Sen calls at 5 and asks me one question, which is, "Was it you?" And when I say no, she says, "All right," and stays on the phone for another 40 minutes making plans, and I put my head on the table afterwards for a while. At 7 in the evening, 2 detectives arrive at St. Brendan's to interview me with my arm dressed and my fingernails still black, and I say the same 9 words about 40 times, which is, "I was outside, and my sister lit it." They ask me why I insured $6 million of contents on the 6th of October. I tell them the truth. I tell them I insured it so that the number would be in a document where my sister would find it. They look at each other. Then the older one says, "Mr. Hollis, do you understand you have just told us you deliberately made yourself a target?" And I say, "Yes, and I would do it again tonight. And please go and look at camera 4. They do not look at camera 4 that evening because the file is in the hands of the fire investigator, and there is a process, and the process takes 9 days, and those 9 days are the longest of both my lives. Donna Ruiz does not call me once in all 9 of them. She cannot. I am a person in her scene, and she is the only official in this city who has not made up her mind about me. And if she telephones me now, she hands the defense a gift. So I am the arsonist for 9 days, and the city does not leave me alone for 1 hour of any of them. And neither does the insurance company, and neither does she. Hannah Beckett rings every morning at 8 and asks whether I am still standing. For the first 3 days, I lie to her about it, and she lets me lie because she has been the one lying in that call herself. On the 10th, 2 detectives and a loss adjuster search my flat on Wells Street for 3 hours. It is the second time this year that a stranger has photographed the inside of my fridge, and I know the routine now. They ask me to unlock my phone. My right arm is dressed from the wrist to the elbow and 2 fingers will not bend, so I do it left-handed, wrong twice. While 3 people stand and watch me fail at a keypad. They take the phone. They take the coat I was wearing, which still smells of the yard. They take a laptop, and when I tell them the archive is not on it, the adjuster writes down that I mentioned the archive without being asked. On the 11th, the company that rents me the rack 40 kilometers out of town terminates my contract for reputational reasons and gives me 24 hours to collect my hardware before they dispose of it. There is 1 copy of that archive left in the world. The other one is a lump of melted plastic in the corner of a burned unit. And I watched a man in a mask carry it out of there in a bag on Friday morning. The 9-fold account is frozen, so I cannot pay anybody anything for anything. I call Ellen Farrow at midnight, and she does not ask me 1 question about money. She drives out there at 1 in the morning and pays $400 of her own. Then she calls the fire service from that car park, and at 4 in the morning, 2 officers take both drives into evidence, and I lose all access to my own proof. And I sleep for the first time in 3 days. On the 4th day, my mother comes to my door. She stands in the corridor with her coat on and does not come in. She looks at my bandaged arm for a long moment and something moves in her face. And for 1 stupid second, I think this is where it turns. She says, "Owen, if you tell them you did it because you were unwell, they will be gentle with you. Your father has spoken to a lawyer. There is a way through this where you get treatment instead of a record." I look at my mother in the doorway of my flat. "Mom," I say, "in 5 days, a fire investigator is going to publish a report, and everything you say to me right now is going to be read back to you for the rest of your life." She says, "I am your mother, and I am trying to save you." And I say, "No, you are trying to save the version of your life where you were right, and you cannot save it because it burned down a long time before that unit did." She leaves. She does not slam the door. My mother has never slammed a door in her life, and I stand in the hall listening to her heels go down 4 flights, and then I sit on the floor and cry for the first time since I came back. On the 13th, Priya Sen calls me herself instead of letting me hear it from anybody else, because that is the kind of person she is. 2 of the 9 hospitals that put their renewals on hold have signed with Hollis Systems. Emergency 12-month deals at a price nobody would take in a good year. Their boards will not buy fire equipment from a fight with an arsonist in it. And this week, the arsonist is me. 9 becomes 7 in 1 morning. Then she tells me her own board has asked her to step back from the buying group until the investigation closes, and that she has already told them no in writing. And her voice does not move at all while she says it. Somebody puts my telephone number under the video on the 14th. I get 206 calls in 1 day. A man rings at 3 in the morning to say his mother is on a ward at Reading General and that he hopes I burn in a locked room. I write every one of them down with the time beside it because Ellen Farrow told me to write everything down. And after a while, the writing is the only thing keeping my hands steady, and I fill 4 pages before it stops. Then at 9 in the evening, my sister calls, and hers is the polite one, and it is worse than all the others put together. She says she forgives me. She says she has told the police that she is frightened of me. She says she has asked a court to keep me away from her. And then she says, "I do hope the old man from the gate is all right. He is not young Owen. He should not be running towards things." She says goodnight in the voice our mother uses at the end of a telephone call and hangs up. And I sit down on the floor of my hall with my bandaged arm across my knees, and I do not move for a long time. Then I call the fire service and leave a message, and 40 minutes later, an officer I have never met calls me back to say that every line I own has been under an evidence order since Friday, and that they now hold that call twice over. Then I call Tom Buckley's daughter in Marlow Bay and ask her to take her father to her house for 2 weeks. She says he will never agree to it, I say, tell him I asked him to, and he is in her car by 9 the next morning. On the 15th, Ellen Farrow tells me the court has listed my sister's application for the 20th of October, and then she says the sentence I have been refusing to think about since that telephone call. If that order exists on the 24th, she says, you cannot come within 100 meters of Sienna Hollis. Sienna Hollis will be sitting in the front row of the annual general meeting. You will be standing in a car park. 6 months of work, a burned unit and a burned arm, and my sister can take the room away from me with one form and a shaking voice, because a court is built to protect frightened people, and she is very good at being one. That afternoon, 2 men from the insurance company interview me for 5 hours, with a recorder on the table and my father's radio statement printed out and lying face up beside it, and neither of them ever raises his voice. They ask me about the 6th of October, 40 separate times. They ask whether I have ever been treated for a mental illness. They ask why a man would insure a unit for $6 million and then park his own car outside it. I tell them the truth every time, in the same words, in the same order. At the end of it, the younger one says, off the record, that if I did do this, then it is the strangest job he has seen in 9 years of the work. On the 16th, a lawyer from my father's side drives out to the cold house on the north side of the river and offers Ruth Hollis a number for her 9% that would heat every room in it for the rest of her life. Ruth calls me afterwards. She says, I have been cold for 11 years and I have got used to it. Then she says, when this is finished, you can buy me a coat, and she hangs up before I can find anything to say back. On the 9th day, at 11 in the morning, Donna Ruiz publishes a preliminary finding of deliberate ignition by a third party, with a footnote referring to a silent alert recorded at 9:46 and 11 seconds and to 14 camera files held in evidence. She does not name anybody. The report is 4 pages of the driest writing you will ever read in your life, and it is the most beautiful document I have ever held in my hands. I tsekoltasti vipai denies, and then den denies, I train nice. Because my family has spent 9 days telling the whole city that I am an arsonist, Dana Ruiz does one further thing that she does not have to do, and I will be grateful to her until I die properly. She gives a 2-minute statement outside the Delroy Street station, on camera. She says the person who set the fire on the 9th of October arrived in a vehicle, chained the door from the outside, and spoke aloud before ignition. Then she says that the audio is clear. That last phrase goes around this city in about 40 minutes, and by 6 in the evening, it has been repeated on 2 national bulletins. That evening, my sister does not post anything at all. It is the first day in 6 months that Sienna Hollis puts nothing on the internet, and Noel Park notices it before I do, and sends me one message that says she has gone quiet. On the 19th, one day before the hearing, my sister withdraws her application to the court without any explanation at all, and Ellen Farrow calls me at 8 in the morning and says, you are going to that meeting. I sit on the floor of my flat with my arm on a cushion, and I look at the calendar, and the annual general meeting of Hollis Systems is on the 24th of October at 11 in the morning, in the glass hall at the Veron. 300 seats. 4 journalists, the buying group, the bank, a live stream, because my father set one up in the good years and never canceled the contract, and because he wants this city to watch him be rescued. I pick up my phone and call the number on the card Elias Kane gave me in April, and he answers on the second ring at 10:30 at night, and he does not say hello. He says, I saw the statement. Mr. Kane, I say, I would like the room now. There is a pause on the line long enough that I check the screen to see whether he is gone. Then he says, the annual meeting is on the 24th. Yes, I say, 20 minutes and a screen. He says, that room belongs to your father for that morning, and your father would rather set himself on fire than hand you a microphone in it. I know, I say. That is why I called you and not a lawyer. Elias Kane is quiet for 4 seconds. Then he says, your father has a live stream contract with a small audio-visual firm on Baker Row, 11 employees. He has not looked at that contract since the good years. On the 22nd of October, Kane Industrial buys the audio-visual firm on Baker Row. It costs him about the price of a delivery van. Nobody writes about it. Nobody notices it at all. Which means that, on the morning of the 24th of October, every camera, every microphone, and the entire live stream in the glass hall at the Variant belonged to a man my father insulted in May. Ellen Farrow does the other half. Ruth Hollis holds 9%, and a shareholder may nominate one representative to address the meeting, and Ruth nominates her nephew, in writing, 11 days in advance, correctly. My father's lawyers try to block it on the 23rd, and they fail on the 23rd because the article is 40 years old and my grandfather wrote it, and my father has never read the constitution of his own company. Do not sleep on the night of the 23rd. At 4 in the morning, I stand in my kitchen with my arm throbbing, and I say the whole thing out loud to a white box with a green light on it, twice, until my voice stops doing the thing it does. The glass hall at the Variant on the 24th of October is full at 11 in the morning, and I know that because I am standing in a corridor behind it listening to 300 people sit down, 4 journalists at the press table, and Roe in the middle of them. The buying group on the left, with the 2 hospitals that ran away in October back in the row, and Priya Sen at the end of it in a red coat. 2 men from the bank at the back, watching an asset that is no longer theirs. Noelle Park at the side wall with a folder she does not need. Hannah Beckett in the 4th row, 90 minutes from home, in a jacket with the sleeves down. My father opens the meeting at 11:03 with a recovery plan. He is good. He is genuinely good. He talks about a difficult year, about a family matter that has been misunderstood, and about the strength of the order book. Adrian Vance sits on his right in a suit that fits, 6 weeks into a board seat, nodding at the correct moments. My mother is in the 2nd row. My sister is in the front row in navy, with her hands in her lap being brave for the cameras. At 11:19, the chair reaches shareholder representations, and my Aunt Ruth Hollis stands up in the 5th row in her coat, 79 years old, and the whole room turns around to look at her. My father says, "Ruth," and it comes out of him before he can stop it, in a voice from about 1960. Ruth ignores him completely. She reads the letter I wrote and she signed, and she reads it slowly because she has waited 11 years. She reads 4 sentences about the patent. She reads 2 about the 11th of April. Then she says, "And I nominate my representative to address this meeting for 20 minutes. And the door at the back of the hall opens. I walk down the middle of 300 people with a dressing from my wrist to my elbow and a remote control in my left hand, and I do not look at my mother, and I do not look at my sister, and the room is so quiet I can hear my own shoes. My father says my name into a live microphone. I say, "Good morning," and I put the first slide up, and after that, nobody in that hall says anything for a very long time. The first slide is a page of a notebook, photographed on the 7th of May in Ellen Farrow's office, dated 4 years before the filing, in my handwriting, with green ink in the margin from a man who taught me. The second is the memo Noelle Park filed on the 11th of April at 4:55 in the afternoon. The third is the facilities report from the 18th with a badge swipe at 4:12 on the 12th. The fourth is the preliminary finding from the patent office on the 12th of September, which says the true inventor and which says my name. And I hold that one on the screen while I count to 5 in my head. Then I say, that is the theft. It took 11 minutes. Now I am going to show you the rest. And I would like the 2 gentlemen at the back to stay where they are and everybody else to please remain seated. I put up camera 4. Room watches a car come into a yard with its lights off. The room watches a woman in a dark coat with the hood up walk around a parked car and touch the bonnet with the back of her hand to see if it is warm. The room watches her lift a red can and a chain out of a boot. It watches her thread that chain through 2 door handles and pull it tight and clip it, quickly and neatly, like somebody who has done it before. And then I turn the sound on. "Owen," she says, and her voice comes out of 11 speakers in a glass hall at the Variant. I know you can hear the chain. Somebody in the 3rd row makes a noise. My father half stands up, and Adrian puts a hand on his arm, and my father sits back down, and the recording keeps going, because a recording does not care who is in the room. You should have signed the paper in April. Everything would have been quick and clean. Now it has to be slow. And honestly, that is your own fault. I took the patent, and I would have kept it if you had stayed in your lab where you were useful. I took Adrian, and that one was so easy it was insulting. Adrian Vance hears his own name in his wife's voice in front of 300 people, and I watch 6 weeks of a board seat come off his face in about 2 seconds, and I do not enjoy it as much as I expected to. My son, sir. It's Ian. I took your parents in the first year, before you even knew there was a competition, and tonight I took the alarms. 19 sensors. Your sensors, Owen. I muted every one of them from the admin account at 9:40, and nobody will ever look because nobody ever looks. I stop it there. I do not play the ignition. Ruiz asked me not to, and I have never had any intention of showing 300 people a fire. I say into the microphone that recording is held in evidence by the fire service under a continuity log signed on the 10th of October. It has been in the hands of the investigator since 4 in the morning. I have never had a copy that was not sealed. And my sister stands up, and I want to be fair to her, because she is the best I have ever seen, and she does not panic even now. She turns to the room, and she says in a small, clear voice that this is a man who has been unwell for a year, that anything can be made with software now, and that she is not going to defend herself against her own brother in public. And it works. I can feel it work. About a third of that room wants very badly to believe her, because the alternative is that they have all been wrong out loud for 6 months. So I do not argue with her. I have learned this the hard way, and it cost me a building. You cannot out-talk her. Nobody can out-talk her. I turn instead to the 4th row, and I say, Mrs. Beckett, would you stand up, please? Hannah Beckett stands up in a room of 300 strangers and pushes her right sleeve to the elbow and holds her arm out and does not say one single word, and the silver of that scar catches the light from the glass roof. Then I say, 6 years ago, a garage went up under this woman's bedroom. The smoke alarm came off that ceiling with the battery in backwards. The girl who was living in that house at the time is standing in the front row of this meeting in Navy. 300 people turn their heads at the same time, and my sister is standing in the middle of it with her mouth slightly open. And for the first time in 13 years, I watch her fail to find the correct face. She looks for my mother. That is the thing I will remember. In the worst 4 seconds of her life, my sister does not look for a lawyer or a door. She looks for my mother, the way she has since she was 10 years old, and my mother looks at the floor. The chairman is required to put the resolutions. My father puts them, because there is nothing else he can do at that point, and his hands are flat on the table in front of him, and his voice has gone. Ruth Hollis votes her 9% against the board. 11% goes with her, because she has been telephoning old men since September. The institutions go with her, because the institutions read the patent office finding on the 12th. The board is removed at 11:52 in the morning. My father stops being chairman of the company his sister and his father built, in a glass room, on a live stream, in front of 4 journalists and both of his children. Adrian Vance resigns from the board at 11:54. He does it in 1 sentence, and he does not look at his wife when he says it, and he leaves by the side door, and I have not spoken to him since. An ordination. And at the 11:56, the 2 men at the back of the hall walk down the middle aisle, and one of them says my sister's full name out loud, and the whole room hears the words on suspicion of arson. They do it quietly. They are extremely polite about it. Sienna Hollis is arrested in the front row of her father's annual general meeting, in front of 300 seats, 4 journalists, and a live stream she cannot control. She goes very calmly. She keeps her chin up and her face perfect all the way to the door, because that face has been her job since she was 10 years old, and she is still working at 11:57. At the door, she stops and turns around and finds me, and she says 1 sentence, loudly, so that it carries. She says, "You were always going to be the one who counted things," and she smiles. Ivy Marsh is stopped that afternoon at 4 o'clock on the North Road out of the city, in a gray car with a plate that a suspended engineer photographed on Chalmers Street on the 12th of April at midnight from 200 meters. Ivy Marsh is my sister's mother. It takes 9 weeks and a court order to prove it, and about 4 seconds to believe it, and the county home paperwork from 13 years ago has her signature on it as a family friend. Ray had it in a folder for 4 years. Ruth had a name for 11. Nobody ever put the 2 of them on the same table, because the only person in this city with a reason to do that was busy building fire alarms and being nobody's favorite. The first thing I do on the 25th of October, before the lawyers, before anything, is withdraw the insurance claim on Unit 9. All $6 million of it in writing on a Saturday. I do it because that number was bait and never a plan. And because my father said the word insurance into a radio microphone at 9:10 in the morning while I was still on a hospital trolley, and I want that sentence to have nowhere to live. Rowe writes it up on the 26th in 1,100 words. The headline is not a question this time. The man who insured the building he was locked inside and then gave the money back. The insurance company writes to me anyway, 3 weeks later, to say that the withdrawal is noted and that in 19 years of loss adjusting, nobody has done that, and I put the letter in a drawer, and I do not tell anybody about it for a long time. Hollis Systems does not die. That surprises people. A new board goes in on the 4th of November with Ruth Hollis at the head of it, 79 years old, in a coat, in her father's chair, 40 years late. Priya Sen renews for the buying group on the 11th of November, all 12 hospitals, including the 2 that ran, at the same price they were paying in the good years, and she never once mentions the 2 that ran. The patent office issues its final determination on the 2nd of December. Correction of inventorship granted. My name goes on it as the true inventor and the assignment chain follows because there is a transfer in it that I never signed. I pay the list. That takes longer than anything else, and it is the only part of this I would do again, exactly the same way. Tom Buckley does not come back to nights. He runs the yard at Ninefold in daylight, and he still calls me kid, and he has never once let me apologize for the car parked outside that door, and I have stopped trying. Noelle Park is head of licensing at Ninefold at 24 years old, which is absurd, and which she has justified 9 times over. She still eats lunch outside on a wall because the office is loud. Daniel gets days. That is the whole of what he asked for. Days. At one site, 40 minutes closer to a baby who has finally started sleeping, and Marta cried on the telephone about it for 11 minutes. Hollis in compliance takes early retirement in January with the pension he was owed and a reference from Ruth. And he tells me he sleeps better than he has since about the year my father took over. Ray gets paid properly for the first time in 4 years. Ellen Farrow gets $400 back and refuses it twice, so I have it framed in cash in a box on her office wall, which she says is the most annoying thing anybody has ever done to her. Hannah Beckett gets the thing she actually wanted, which was never money. The garage fire from 6 years ago is reopened in February on the strength of one page about an alarm, and an investigator drives 90 minutes north to sit in her kitchen and ask her about the battery. He believes her. That is all. A man with a folder sits at her table and writes down what she says and does not explain to her that people make mistakes when they are tired, and Hannah calls me afterwards and cannot speak for the first 40 seconds. And I buy Ruth a coat. It costs $490, and it is the warmest thing in that house, and she wears it indoors, and she tells everybody who comes to the door what it cost. Trial begins in March. It runs for 9 days. I am in the witness box for 2 of them, and the defense barrister is very good, and he asks me 11 separate ways whether I hated my sister, and I say yes 11 separate times. He asks me whether I built a trap. I say yes. He asks whether I wanted her to walk into it. I say yes. He asks whether an innocent man does that, and I say that an innocent man who has been told for 6 months that he is unwell will do almost anything for one recording. On the 6th day, the defense calls my mother as a character witness for my sister, and she stands in that box and says that Sienna has always been a gentle girl who was never quite sure she was allowed to stay. Then Ellen Farrow reads her the conversation from my doorway on the 12th of October, word for word, with the date and the time and the sentence about telling them he did it because he was unwell. My mother says she does not remember saying that. Ellen Farrow says, I know. Then she sits down, and my mother stands in the box for another 11 seconds, with nobody asking her anything at all. Camera 4 runs in that courtroom on the 7th day, with the sound up. The jury is out for 4 hours and 10 minutes on the 9th day. Arson with intent to endanger life. Guilty. Attempted murder. Guilty. Sienna Hollis gets 22 years. Ivy Marsh gets 9 for the county home paperwork and for 2 of the 3 older fires. And the third one goes unproven forever, and I have made my peace with that number being 3 and not 4. My sister does not look at me when it is read out. She looks at my mother in the second row, exactly the way she did in the glass hall, and my mother this time looks back at her and holds her eyes and does not look away. I do not know what to do with that. I have thought about it for a year. My mother chose her at the last second, when it cost everything and bought nothing, and I think that is the most honest thing my mother has ever done. My father is not in that courtroom. He sold the Cedar Hill house in January, and he lives in a flat now, and he has written me 2 letters, and both of them are about the company, and neither of them contains the word sorry. I answer them both, politely, in 4 lines, about the company. Some things do not get repaired. You just stop picking at them and go to work. Donna Ruiz calls me on the 2nd day after the verdict, which is the first time she has telephoned me for a reason that is not a case, and she is extremely bad at it. and it takes her about 90 seconds to get to the point. She says, "My part is finished." I say, "I noticed." She says, "There is a coffee place near the station that is genuinely terrible, and I go there 4 times a week, and I would like to know why you never once asked me whether I believed you." "Because you told me in August," I say. "You said either I was careful or I was unwell, and you had spent 3 weeks failing to decide. And a person who has spent 3 weeks on it is not somebody you nag." There is a silence on that line that goes on slightly too long. Then she says, "Be outside at 6," and hangs up, because that is how she ends telephone calls, and I have stopped expecting anything else. She is standing by her car at 6 with 2 coffees, and the coffee is genuinely terrible. And she looks at the extinguisher on the wall behind me before she looks at me, and I do not say anything about it this time. We walk from Delroy Street to the river, which takes about 40 minutes and could be done in 15, and she tells me about her father, the station officer, and about the 2 people she has ever argued with about a battery. Then she says, "For the record, Mr. Hollis, I did not believe you in April, and I did not believe you in August." I say, "I know." She says, "I believed you at 9:46 and 11 seconds, along with everybody else, and I have never been more relieved about anything in my life." A year later, there are 11 of us at Ninefold and 4,000 boxes on ceilings in this city, and every one of them does the thing my sister found out about the hard way. If you mute them, they go quiet, and then they tell 4 telephones. The blue notebook is ash, 91 pages, in a box rated 30 minutes short, in the corner of a burned unit. I could not save it, and I have stopped wishing I had, because it was doing its job at the time. So there is a new one. It has a green cover, and it lives in the second drawer of a desk in a building with 2 exits and a woman who checks where the extinguisher is before she sits down. The first line on the first page is not a design. It is a date and a name, and the name is mine, and I wrote it in my own hand on the morning after the verdict, and nobody in this world will ever take it off that page again.
So that is the story. A girl builds something good, and the people who should have protected her hand her name to somebody with a nicer smile, and then they spend years defending that smile, because admitting the truth would cost them too much. Look at what actually beat it. Not shouting, not one clever speech, a memo with a date on it, a door sensor log, a cheap camera nobody turned the sound off on. She could not out-talk a woman built for talking, so she built the thing that does not argue, and does not get tired, and does not care who is crying. And then she waited. If somebody near you is the victim in every single story they tell, stop arguing with them. Start writing things down.